The pressure continues to grow for Manchester City and Pep Guardiola in particular, with the media now suggesting that Pep Guardiola should be sacked or at least walk from his position as the Manchester City manager. I disagree with both stances there. I do not believe Pep Guardiola should be sacked, and I don't believe he's going to walk either, because I think that would actually be hugely detrimental to his managerial career. For the first time to face such severe adversity right now, to face one of the hardest moments in his career, to walk away from it would kind of undo all of the successes that he's done as Manchester City. To walk away from it now, we're not even at January yet. It's only just started going wrong. We're 12 games into a terrible run. 1 win in 12. Awful. It's awful. If he walked away now, I'd be questioning, if I was the next employer of Pep Guardiola, whether it's at another club or even an international job, I'd be like, are you going to stick around if it starts going wrong though? Because the evidence isn't great, mate. You walked away when it started going wrong. He ain't going to walk away. He's too defiant. He's too stubborn. There's no way. But I'll tell you one thing that this isn't anything to do with is 115 charges. It's got nothing to do with 115 charges, this. This is a psychological problem, and I'll get onto that shortly. But there is no way this is the 115 charges, because they just found out about it? Is this just new? Is it? They've just found out about the 115 charges. 6th of February 2023, the charges were announced. We won a treble following that. We won 4 in a row the season after that. You know? They knew about the charges then. Surely that was the time to kick up a fuss and say, hey, excuse me, my agent, I'm kind of worried about my future as a Manchester City player. Am I going to be a Manchester City player in a year's time? What if we get relegated? Because no one knew when the verdict was even going to happen. So it could have been in a month, could have been in 2 months, could have been 6 months, could be in a year. No one knew at the time. No one knew that. But so therefore the players didn't know that. So their future was in jeopardy. But did they show it on the pitch? No, because the evidence is there for you to see. They went and won a treble and 4 Premier League titles in a row. So the charges are not affecting these players. And even if they do know the verdict, which is just absolutely categorically not true, there's no way the players know, because if the players knew, we would know. And you know why? Because these players would be knocking on their door or ringing up their agent and saying, excuse me, I've just found out Manchester City are guilty of the 115 charges and we're going to get relegated. Therefore, I do not want to be. I am Erling Haaland and I don't want to be a League One player. I don't want to get relegated. Find me a Barcelona job. Find me a spot at Real Madrid, Mr. Agent. I want out of Manchester City. That's what they will do. That's the first thing they will do. And if that's the case, the agents would be on the phones to all the football clubs in the world. And do you think that we shouldn't have heard a leak about that by now? Do you think we would not have heard about that? Of course we would have heard about that. That would be leaked everywhere. We haven't heard a single leak about the verdict so far. It has been watertight. There is no information about the verdict whatsoever. The players do not know. I promise you, they do not know. Okay? So what is the problem then? I believe it's become a psychological problem. It started with injuries and there's this boring excuse that I'm fed up of talking about. Yes, it's a legitimate excuse, but avoidable because of the club's policy and the transfer, the way they treated all the excessive, the too much treatment, too kind treatment to the likes of De Bruyne, Gundogan, Bernardo, Silva, Kyle Walker, players that are all well over 30 now and should be phased out of the football club. Manchester City have done fantastic jobs of phasing players out to the point where you didn't even know it was happening. If you think about Fernandinho, no one spoke about Fernandinho. Oh, he's finished, Fernandinho. He's dead. He's rubbish. He's crap, that Fernandinho, because he was slowly phased out and in came Rodri, slowly. Same for Phil Foden and Kevin De Bruyne, who came in as David Silva, was slowly phased out. Aguero was phased out into a point where we didn't even need to have a striker with the system that was being played with the false nine. And in comes Erling Haaland 1 year later. Vincent Kompany goes, Ruben Diaz comes in. There's this bit, Yaya Toure goes, and I would argue Bernardo Silva was actually Yaya Toure's replacement. Even though they're completely different players, I would argue that those two were actually kind of in the first season for Bernardo Silva in particular, playing through the middle of Manchester City. He came in and slowly phased out Yaya Toure. You know, that phasing of players was done perfectly with so many superstars of these Manchester City legends that they've gone on to be now. Okay, and we've just missed one transfer window. We pushed it too far with one transfer window. It's a mistake. Cheeky, the board, Varane, Pep's included in that as well, because he's involved in these conversations that take place with regards to planning for transfer activity. Pep Guardiola's involved, Pep and Cheeky and Varane and multiple staff members are involved. All the scouts are involved. All the scouting network that gets involved in it. They are all culpable and at fault for this. This is why we don't need to start pointing fingers at individuals and say, Pep out, things like that. we've not phased these players out correctly. We've hung on to them. We've tried to squeeze too much out of these players now. So we've learned from that. They need replacing. That is surely going to happen in summer, okay? But to now say Pep out, for who? Who? What do you want? Juan Lilo, the number 2 stat there, because I tell you what, he'll be going. If Pep was sacked by this team, there will be player uproar. The players are behind Pep Guardiola. I am convinced of that. I am convinced that they respect Pep Guardiola enough to be upset if the man lost his job. They do not want to see him lose his job. I'm telling you that right now. And the backroom staff, they'll be going out the door with him. Okay, because they will be like, if you're sacking Pep, it's not going to happen. This is a hypothetical situation. The relationship with Khaldoon Mubarak and Pep Guardiola, they are like that, mate. They are absolutely hand and glove, mate. Do you know what I mean? They are absolutely solid relationship. There would be no way Pep Guardiola's getting sacked. And if you did come out with something stupid like Pep out, for who? Who do you want to come in then? And who realistically could you get? Because I keep hearing stuff, go and get Alonso. Or what about Ancelotti? Yeah, mid-season, in the middle of a season, while they're looking after Bayer Leverkusen. They're in the middle of a project. They're not going to quit. They're not going to leave and join Manchester City. There aren't any managers that are going to do any better than Pep Guardiola with the circumstances we're in right now. So shut up about Pep out. It's pointless. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Get over it, mate. You need to move on from Pep Guardiola being the problem, because it's a daft accusation. It makes no sense. And the fact that you're coming out with it without actually giving a name as to who could replace Pep Guardiola is proof that you know nothing about what you're talking about. You don't have a plan. You're just coming out with rash statements to make yourself sound good and clever. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about, Pep out. Absolute nonsense. The idea that these players are not trying is an interesting topic, though. I think there's more to explore there because of a psychological aspect to what's going on at this Manchester City side right now. I would argue that they came onto that pitch with a good attitude yesterday against Villa. The ground duels that were won in the first half. Manchester City won 52% of their ground duels against Aston Villa yesterday in that game in the first half. More than Aston Villa. We outfought Aston Villa in the first half of that game. So that is not a lack of effort. The concerning thing is that it plummeted to 32% of our ground duels being won following the second goal. Once that second goal goes in the second half, our ground duels just plummeted. The fight was gone. That is not an attitude that's linked to Pep, because Pep Guardiola is the man who sends them onto that pitch. The reason they started the game with a much better attitude. But what happens within the span of 90 minutes is what can have a massive effect on these players psychologically. And that's what this is. The mind is a powerful place, mate. An incredibly powerful place. And it can go two ways. If you keep feeding it with positive, guess what you can do? You can go and win yourself a treble. You can go and win 4 Premier League titles in a row. Is Pep not getting a pat on the back for that? He's the man who did that. He's the man who manifested that psychological aura around these wonderful players that are Manchester City players, that they've gone on to, they are now spoiling their legacy, which is such a shame. And I'm gutted that we have to speak negatively about these legends that have done so much for this club. So much. It's heartbreaking. It really is. It's gut-wrenching. It's brutal. It's brutal. I hate it. I don't like it at all. But the facts are that this has become a psychological problem. And if you keep feeding it negative, you start to see it on the pitch. Nathan Ake picking up an injury at the end of the game the other day. You saw Bernardo Silva go up to him on his knees, knackered, saying, "Are you okay? What's the injury?" And Nathan Ake obviously said, "Yeah, I'm going to be out for a couple of weeks. This is a serious one, muscular." Bernardo Silva turns around and goes, "Oh." You know, that attitude, okay? That's that's around the club right now. You saw it on the pitch against Aston Villa. It's this, "Oh, woe is me. Oh, not again. Oh, it's going wrong again. Oh, get the small violins out, everybody, and everyone feels sorry for us because it's going wrong." This negative mentality that's manifested from legitimate things like injuries and circumstances, unfortunate circumstances as well. There's no two ways about it. These injuries are clearly a problem. We have made 50 changes. Before the Aston Villa game, Pep Guardiola had made 50 changes to the starting 11 over the course of this season, more than any other Premier League side. Now, you would argue that, yeah, Pep likes to tinker here and there, but not that much. 50 changes. Clearly, we've had a massive exodus of players due to injury. We have lost half our squad to these injuries. That would affect any team in the world. No two ways about it. But right now, it's evolved into another problem, though. It's become a psychological epidemic with these players right now. That this is, "Oh, woe is me." It's just a woe is me situation. It's like everybody feels sorry for us, you know, and no one does. No one does, and no one will. You know, you got to pick yourself up in these situations. If you keep looking in the mirror and saying, "No, I'm never going to be great. We're never going to be great. We're never going to be great." Guess what's going to happen? You're never going to be great. Never. If you tell yourself, we're going to do this, we're going to fucking do this, we're going to turn it round, and we're going to fix this problem, and all of us together, we're going to stick together and we're going to do it. That's what we need to do. And guess what will happen? It will be the first stepping stone towards a positive end of the season. I guarantee it. I absolutely guarantee it that these players can turn this round. We are in a top 4 race. There's no two ways about it now. We're not winning a Premier League title. We're not winning a Champions League trophy either. The chances of an FA Cup heavily depends on the luck of the draw. If we keep getting the likes of Salford in the rounds and keep playing lower league, then maybe we can get to a semi-final and start facing Premier League opposition and scrape over the line, and maybe by that point we've salvaged some form, we've rectified the situation a little bit, and we can go and win an FA Cup, and that would be an unbelievable season. But ultimately it has to be top 4 football is the priority, because you want to rebuild right now. Rebuilding requires a top level of quality players, and these top level quality players, they want Champions League football, and if you can't provide that for them, are they going to sign for Manchester City? So it makes the rebuild even harder. These players have to do one last thing. These players that are clearly on the way out of the club, a lot of them have already seemed to have decided that they're on their way out of the club and this was going to be their final season. Do one last thing for this unbelievable football club that is Manchester City. Just get us into the top 4. That's what you need to do to make the rebuild that bit better, just that bit easier and more simplistic for these players, and the future players, But I disagree that the players are not trying. I think they're afraid, they're frail, their minds are eggshells, mate. They just crumble, they're cracked. It's so easy to just see the fragility of these, the mentality of these players. That second goal, we absolutely nothing to speak about once Aston Villa went 2-0 up. The only team that was going to score after that was Aston Villa, and I cannot believe we got a goal out of that game. Incredible amount of luck. It took about 4 ricochets off Phil Foden. He took it nicely. So Phil Foden, you can talk about him in a positive light for the fact that maybe now he can salvage some personal form for himself. But ultimately, this is a psychological problem. How you go about fixing it, it takes individual power. It takes just will, just sheer fucking will. Do you know what I mean? That's what this takes. Now, it takes to look in the mirror, admit the problem. And the way Pep Guardiola conducted himself in that post-match interview against Aston Villa, I felt there was a certain level of admission from Pep Guardiola watching him yesterday, because he didn't have any sarcastic attitude. He didn't have any scratches on his face or any sort of very tense sort of responses to the media. He sat there and he had quite an open and honest conversation. He didn't seem flustered in the slightest. And that looked like a man who seemed quite clear and understanding and comprehending the situation we're in, and it was a level of admission that we are in a massive problem right now and it needs addressing. And that's what they say for all people who have problems in any walk of life, in any terms of mental well-being. The first step is admitting you've got a problem. Always. It always is. Because if you can't even do it, if you live in denial, you'll never fix the problem. Okay? And that's what Pep Guardiola has clearly not done now. He's got to a point of not being in denial. He's clearly admitting this to the media and to the public and telling everybody that, yeah, Manchester City has a problem. But he is the man that will fix this. What do you think, Blues? Get in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts. Like and subscribe to Typical City, and I'll see you in the next one.
This is Typical City now. Holding up Silva.